Now, I used to want to take the time and do fancy editing, cut some of my videos, and I've been watching YouTube over the last 15, 16 years, and I've got a plethora of information from a lot of different sources. And I used to be really inspired to want to learn all the different video editing softwares because everybody was doing it and it was the thing to do, and people's attention span wouldn't be captivated if you didn't have a fancy intro, some slow motion B-roll. And that has allowed me to procrastinate. Like some of my older videos, I would actually record them, upload them. They wouldn't get any views. To be like pretty much talking headshots like it is now. And of course, you get discouraged because it takes time. When you're working or running a business and to learn softwares and stuff like that to be able to captivate an audience. I always wanted my message to be able to captivate the audience, and I learned that I was getting in my own way because I was so superficial in my approach to wanting to grab my camera, hit the record button, and follow the trend. And that allowed me to procrastinate. That allowed me to procrastinate not to put the information out there that I wanted to share with the world. And as years pass and I continue to watch YouTube and watch it grow and watch it take different directions and different formats and different creators, and I started to realize that a lot of times we're in our own way because we're seeing what works, and when something is worked, they tell you when it's not broke, don't fix it. So people tend to want to follow what is currently the hype because it works and it gets you views and it gets you followers, right? Which leads me into a conversation I want to have today about there's no individualism, right? We all tend to see what works, follow the blueprint, and if it works for us, then we become successful like the other person has become successful. And it's these algorithm systems that is actually driving the human being not to actually have an individuality. So what makes me wonder, is there a such thing as an individuality? Is there a such thing as I came up with this. I'm the person that done it. I. We tend to put the emphasis on that quite a bit in our reality. And me studying psychology over the years has made me realize that there's no such thing as I. I is an illusion. When you really sit back and think about, am I an individual or am I a collective of thoughts and ideas that was passed down to me, and I so-called created an individuality out of all of those thoughts and all of those transgressions based on my life experiences. And we tend to give ourselves an identity based on the stuff that we've learned, we've taken in, and we try to separate ourselves as if we never got it from anywhere else, that we're the only one that came up with it, right? So it's like a catch-22, and it's a psychological warfare on how we tend to think that I have power, I really exist, when it doesn't. So I want to reverse engineer I. I want to say I actually equals we, because we collectively share with each other to inspire each other to so-called create an identity of individualism. I want you to follow me for a second. If I was actually real, right, me looking at myself and saying, hey, I took the time to wake up and learn how to become a photographer, so I studied YouTube and I watched all these different photographers who inspired me to become the photographer I am today, right? Notice I keep putting the emphasis on what I did. But actually, I never really did anything but watch. I never really did anything but receive. So what I'm saying is that you don't have an identity. You just have a replication and a duplication of multiple things that you have taken in. And that is a psychological warfare within inside of us all, because when we think about the power of I, it doesn't really exist, because when I fall into a state of depression, I need to go to therapy to seek counsel from someone else who has probably mastered the human emotion or overcame the circumstances situation that I find myself buried in. So there's really no power in I, because we need each other in order to cohabitate and co-relate and function in our realities. So I want to say that that's one of the greatest tricks in our educational system that has caused us so much ego, so much pride. I remember reading a scripture years ago, and it says that pride, and I'm paraphrasing here, pride is before destruction. So it's almost like if you have pride, at some point you're going to crash. There's going to be some type of catastrophe by soaking into your individuality, by saying I did this, I did that, right? Which brings us into this new day and age of conversation on social media, where everyone is saying that the diagnosis of individuals that have this superficial self-endowed ego, which is now considered to be narcissistic behavior, when in reality our educational system raises us all to be narcissistic. Because when we really think about it, we go to school, we learn that in order to be better than the next individual sitting next to us, we're going to get graded on that, on how well we pay attention versus someone else is paying attention. And that's what's going to create the criteria of who's smarter than who. Because if I'm taking in the information, this other person is like twiddling their thumbs, or they're writing in their book, or coloring in their coloring book, and I'm taking all the information in from the teacher who has educated themselves out of this system and then passed on the information to me, and then I now receive it very well. So when the teacher throws out a question, I raise my hand and I answer it correctly. I am considered to be intelligent because I pay attention. What I'm saying is, we are in this cyclone of psychological warfare within inside of ourselves. And we have fallen in love with the individuality of an illusion of ourselves, which is why society is tough to change, because we're all out here stroking our own ego, trying to compete with the next person to become better than the next person so that we can say we did it. When in fact, there was a blueprint laid before us. So you didn't do anything but receive it. And you practiced it long enough until you got good at it, because you stayed consistent and you were disciplined enough to stay consistent past those who can't. Which is why those who you see consistently on social media, you see the same faces in different places, because their consistency outweighs yours. And you think that they're successful because they're consistently showing you that they can become masters of duplication. So, is there a such thing as I? I say no. There's a such thing as we, because we collectively receive the information, then we duplicate it well enough. We try to put our back to individual spin on it to where as though it's different, but the reality is that it isn't really different. It's just recycled, and we deem ourselves as these powerful individuals who went out and conquered the world. I was watching something, because I'm always watching something educational and informative, especially about human behavior. And I was watching an interview with Shaq, and he was talking about how I think he was on the Pivot podcast, and he was talking about how they were asking him, like, well, Shaq, there has to be like a set number of, you got so many things going on as far as success wise, money wise, and when is it like time to call it quits? And he was like, never, because he create this persona or these false trajectories of happiness by saying, he gave an example of him being on his yacht, and he was somewhere, I can't remember where it was, but the story was he was on his yacht, he was chilling, people knew who he was, so he was just like in his ego, yeah, this is me, this is Shaq, I got my own thing going on, I'm on a yacht, blah, blah, blah. And, and it felt good to him because of his accomplishments and him sitting on the yacht, which most people couldn't afford, so it was like stroking his ego to make him feel like, I made it, So a few minutes later, he hears a horn, and it was another yacht pulling in next to him that was triple the size of the yacht that he was in. So now his emotional ego got involved, and he was like, well, who was this, pulling up next to me? So come to find out, guy pulls right in next to him, yacht 2-3 times the size of his, and here steps out this older gentleman who he says was probably in his 80s, 80, close to 90, right? Older guy. And when he got out, he asked Shaq, he said, hey, is that your yacht? Shaq said, he barely wanted to answer the question because I guess he felt, kind of low. And he's like, yeah. So the guy said, that's pretty small, isn't it? So Shaq said he aspired to be like that guy who was 80 years old, who had a yacht 3 times the size of his, who actually had a younger wife. So he said that's what he wanted to see himself as when he got that age. So that shows you that there's no individuality. There's only reception. We see things, we like them, we receive them, we duplicate them until it actually becomes so-called us as an individual, but it's not. It's a personality that we fell in love with. And just look at the human being, look at the condition of the human being. Everybody follows the same wavelength. If it is working and it's helping someone obtain some type of success, they go in that facet of living. Let's just break down a few things to give context to what I'm saying. Let's take hip hop, right? Let's say hip hop started out as poetry, right? And it was about what people was going through, whether it was their oppression, they gave them like a freedom, to have a voice, right? And then that freedom of having a voice actually turned into profits because someone seen it and said, oh, you guys are rapping over beats and it's making sense and it's catchy and it's, it's actually a business in this. So, all right, so people started to invest in hip hop by saying, okay, well, we can actually make money off of this, right? So when the said group of people who decided to invest in hip hop to turn it into a business, the culture actually started from people's life experiences, their pain, their struggles, and it was just a way to express what they were going through, right? And then someone capitalized on it. And then when someone capitalized and turned it into a business, then people started to create some type of financial freedom and success to find themselves out of the circumstances, like being in the hood and being in these low impoverished areas and not really having food on the table. And now I can provide because I can rap. And so now all of the people in our community, which would be considered the black community, started to see, hey, this is working. So let me learn how to rap. So the next kid would say, you know what, that person is rapping. So let me learn how to rap, because if I learn how to rap, then I could be successful and I can get out of the same circumstances, situations. It's no different from a kid playing basketball. Someone's become successful in basketball. Someone passes the rock. I stay on the court all day long. You go in the house. I become more successful because I'm more dedicated and disciplined. So I'm duplicating, right? So we live in a society where there's constant duplication of someone else's success, and we have to go back and look at where does the foundation start at. But that's a whole nother video. But what I'm basically saying is, we run around with the idea that I really exist when it actually doesn't. It's just a figment of our imagination, and we're in love with it. We're in love with the lie that I exist. And we don't look at, we all follow the trends of success because we all want to stroke the ego of individuality to say that we done something when we did nothing but duplicate. It's interesting to really ask a person, do you know who you are as an individual? And they'll probably say, yes, I know exactly who I am as an individual. And they won't even give a second thought to realize that they're a duplication of everything around them that they consider to be I. But it's a makeup of everything that they're experiencing every day. And they call it I. I got up and did this. I got up and learned this. I went to school for this. But the blueprint was already there for you to do. You did nothing but actually duplicate what someone else did. It was like a transmission of energy that went from this individual to so-called you being an individual, and then you're going to pass it on to another individual who considered to be an individual, when that doesn't really exist. That's why I said a long time ago, and it's kind of hits home to it not being a theory, but a fact, that there is only one mind. And I want you to understand what I'm saying. When I say that there's one mind, you can say there's 11 billion people on the planet, and there's 11 billion individuals. And it's actually not. Because whatever thought catches fire, human beings get attracted to it and they spread it. It's just that simple. So you don't collectively come up with anything original. You just duplicate it, whether it's 1 times or 10 times, right? Like they said, how do you want to 10 times, you want to 10x your life, right? Everybody is trying to get you to figure out or sell you some type of course on how you can make your circumstance better financially, and no one's teaching you how to escape the fragments of your imagination that you have fallen in love with as far as individualism, right? So that's very interesting to me in the educational formats that we have today, right? And it's very, 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 it's uncomplex, but it seems complex because people wake up and they think we live in a complex world when we don't actually live in a complex world. Just look at everything, it's on repeat. It's consistent. Holidays are celebrated the same way they're celebrated the year before. People wake up, they go to their jobs, they hit the time clock the same time, they probably take the same route to work, they go home the same route, right? We're consistently moving in the same direction, but we think we're going in a different one. The only thing that actually changes for us is whether or not we stay dedicated and disciplined long enough to be able to reach the benchmark of what we call financial success or financial freedom, to change our circumstances from living in a $100,000 house to $1 million house, right? Then we get in, that's why they call them neighborhoods or communities, because now we could afford to be in the community of those who actually made it to that level financially, or as they consider, I'm in a different tax bracket, right? So me living in a house that's 150 grand, and someone living in a house that's 1,500,000, and someone's living in a state that's 50 to 60 million. Those are different communities, right? Different tax brackets that we allow ourselves to say that I can now be in this particular group. I've actually elevated myself to this particular group. So now I'm amongst those from my efforts. No, I'm learning that people win in anything they want to win in if consistency is their God. If consistency is your God and you worship it, then something is going to bless you. Right? It's just that simple. Wake up, you want to lose weight, be consistent in the gym, eat right, diet right. You want to be financially free, stay around people who are actually financially free. You get around a certain group of people that's doing certain things, and it's very easy for you to duplicate that success if you're consistent. That's not rocket science, as they would say. It all depends on what your interest is. You're interested in. You'll dedicate your life to it. And if you dedicate your life to it, then you'll see the results. So, this is just a rant, an informative rant, that hopefully will allow you to wake up as an individual, to realize that you are not an individual. You're just a duplication of the environment and societies and cultural belief systems that you have learned to cultivate and capitalize on. But there's another video I'm going to do that's going to actually bring you to the enlightenment of what true individualism is. So you got to stay tuned for the next video. So I just want to kind of inform you on you being a duplication of the creation or the creations that's before you, and then we'll get into the real consciousness of what it means to exist in a state of individuality. I know that's kind of confusing because I just broke down why individually doesn't exist, but now I'm going to inform you on how to get into the space of individuality. And I'll give you a hint. Even in this video that I'll be doing probably next, it's not what you're thinking that it still has merit to a self thing, but it actually has merit in stillness, because individuality is actually, I'll give you a little hint, stillness. When you sit still long enough, or you're able to grasp that consciousness, like I said in my last video, is not always accessible to you, that you revisit a place of unconsciousness, like this rotation, this cycle. You kind of like disappear and reappear. It's almost like the greatest magician trick on them in the universe. I'm existing now, like I'm existing now recording this video, and then there's going to come a time where I'm not existing consciously to even create a video. Then I'll reappear to create another one, right? So we'll get into that. So this is a rant. Like I said, I used to want to be super inspired to actually write scripts on my videos, read off a teleprompter, and I felt like, see, I'm so used to using I. We're so used to using I that it's confusing, it's conflicting. But here we go. I gotta explain it that way because there's no other way for me to explain it. So, but I understand what I'm saying, and hopefully you understand what I'm saying. that I'm not really saying it, but I'm just saying it. Okay. Man, it's hard for me to get it out of my mouth because it's like, wow, I can't even tie I to me because it doesn't even exist. But anyway, for educational purposes, I did not want to script anything in any of my videos because I wanted it to come off natural, organic, unblemished. Whether I made a mistake, whatever you want to call a mistake, I don't see life as mistakes, right? It just happens and it doesn't happen, right? That's just how I see life. That's how the universe works. There's no such thing as mistakes. There's no such thing as perfection or imperfection. So that's a whole nother conversation that we'll get into as these videos progressively continue to manifest themselves, because man, there's so much information I have to offer you, and I just want you to continue to ride with me on this journey, because I'm not going to be finished, but as I continue to put the videos out, you're going to continue to step into the space of awareness that no one is taking you to. And there are people out there, but not from this point of view or perspective, right? So, anyway, thank you for paying attention to my videos, rants, but it's informative and educational. So, one of the things that I coined years ago in my videos is, and I like to leave you with this on every video: if you exercise supreme thought, because everything starts in the mind, if you exercise supreme thought and you keep your foot on the gas of your supreme consciousness as you're going through life, and you're learning how to accelerate and brake, meaning being in control of your emotional state because you're in your awareness of everything that's going on, then you step into this hiatus of what we title as God, right? Exercise supreme thought, supreme consciousness, and you will become the supreme being. I can't even say of yourself, because self goes back to I, and I is associated with individualism where there's no power. So we'll get into the real state of power. So, and I have an acronym for self, but we'll talk about that in another video as well. So thank you for listening. Peace to the next one. Continue to elevate the mind state and focus on not being a duplication. That's it.